Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another 2024 election related video. I know it's been a while. I apologize for the very long hiatus from YouTube. I've just been really busy, but now it's June, it's summer, and I have a lot more time on my hands. So I am really happy to be back and to update my prediction for the 2024 presidential election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Now, I haven't made a lot of updates or consistent updates for this race. I think my last prediction for this was like back in January, which I'm not very proud of. I really should have found some way to squeeze another one in between now and then. But nonetheless, I think that this has been a race that I've been kind of averse to talking about, not because it's boring or because it's the same matchup as the last election cycle, but just because I feel like a lot of factors in this race have made it really hard to stomach and to talk about. And I'm just more interested in the Senate and House races. But nonetheless, a presidential election is still very interesting, and it's only going to get more interesting as we head into the final 5 months of the campaign. It's June 9th when I'm recording this, so we are less than 5 months out from November 5th, which is Election Day. And yeah, I mean, I think that this is going to be a very close election. I don't think that either party should be counted out at this point. I think that that's stupid. You know, as to the partisans out there, you can be cautiously optimistic about your candidate's chances because I think there are a lot of reasons to think that Joe Biden is favored, and there are a lot of reasons to think that Donald Trump is favored. Now, obviously, I'm not going to reveal my prediction, and you're not going to see the full result until the very end. But nonetheless, we should get into it. So as you can see, I think that Donald Trump will pick Senator Tim Scott as his running mate. Tim Scott has long been viewed as one of Trump's potential vice presidential picks, and it seems like he is one of the 8 Republicans that Trump is considering who received vetting materials for the vice presidential nominating, I'm using air quotes, nominating process. But Trump said he will reveal his pick at the convention. I think it's very possible that it's someone like Doug Burgum or Marco Rubio or even JD Vance. But I think Tim Scott right now is who Trump will pick. But we'll have to wait and see. I don't think Trump's vice presidential pick is really going to change the outcome of the election. It usually doesn't, but they can help and hurt you. And I think Tim Scott in this case would honestly present more of a moderate image for some independent voters. I don't think that he's perfect. I think that some of the comments he's made around abortion aren't great for like middle of the road voters. But I think overall his general demeanor will kind of balance with Trump, sort of like how Mike Pence balanced with Trump's bombastic personality in 2016. So let's get into the election. So we're going to start by filling out the safe states for the Democrats and Republicans. Not Colorado, actually, although it's almost safe. Illinois, not Nebraska. What am I doing? Maine, New York. I won't list out all the states here, but these are the states that are going to go to either party by over 15 percentage points. They really have they have no shot of going to the other party. I'm gonna add in Nebraska's first congressional district. It's was the old version under the 2020 map was like I want to say went for Trump by just under 15 points, so it was technically a likely margin. If you go on to jacksonjude.com, it was listed as a likely margin. Let's go. Yeah, it was just barely under 15 percentage points. I think it got a little bit bluer in redistricting, but I'm just going to put it as safe. I think Kansas will be safe as well. Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, most of the deep south here. Um, and yeah, so these are our safe states. I have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris at 181 electoral votes, and Donald Trump and Tim Scott at 113 electoral votes. So overall, we have a number. Some of these blank states are not going to be very competitive, but are not, quite entrenched enough in either party's column to be considered safe. And some of these are going to be the big battlegrounds that we're going to want to watch out for. So we're going to start by filling out the likely states, which are states that will be decided by between 5 and 15 percentage points. It's a big gap. Some of these states are going to be considered closer to being toss-ups. Um, and others are going to be very close to being safe. But yeah, we're going to start with South Carolina. I think there's a very good chance it's safe, especially with Tim Scott on the ticket. But South Carolina almost always votes. I don't know why close the tab for that. We can actually use the history here. It'll help me make my point for South Carolina. It almost always, votes for Republicans by a likely margin. It almost never gets over that 15 percentage point hump. To a certain point, if it's like 14.6 or 14.99, it's really close to safe, like just a couple decimals away. I can, just round it up to safe. But I think South Carolina will be more like 12 to 13, maybe 13, 14, a solid 14 percentage point win for Trump. And yeah, I mean, Biden has no chance of winning the state. Democrats held their first primary or caucus. I can't remember which one it was for South Carolina for 2024 here in an effort to boost black voters, which is interesting. South Carolina is not a solid red state, but it's pretty red. So yeah, it would take a lot for Biden to win in this political environment where he's really struggling in the polls, which polls aren't gospel, and I certainly don't think so in this election cycle. Um, but I think that South Carolina pretty entrenched in the red in the Republican column. We're also going to go to Alaska. Alaska is a state that Trump has not done as well in as other Republican candidates. If you go back to like the 2000s, George W. Bush won it by massive margins, and John McCain and Sarah Palin won it by a massive margin in 2008. Romney in 2012, this is when things start to get interesting. It's less than 15 percentage points for him. And then Trump starts to only won it by 10 in 2020. I think there's a chance that it narrows up again, especially with Mary Peltola as the Democratic House candidate on the ballot. I think, there'll obviously be a massive ticket split between the two, and I think Trump's going to win Alaska by potentially 10 points again, but I think it could also, narrow down to 8 to 9 points. Either way, Alaska's got a future as a swing state, but I think that that's a ways away, and it definitely won't be in this election cycle. On the presidential level, at least on the House level, absolutely. Maine's second district. This used to be a very Democratic district. It's a very working class, rural. But Trump, in the 2000s, and Obama won it both times. It was a pretty reliably Democratic district. But then Trump won it by 10 points in 2016, and he won it again by pretty hefty margin in 2020. I think his margin increases here, probably back up to 2016 numbers, maybe even a little bit beyond that. Although I don't know, it could be like 8 or 9 points. Either way, I think that this district's going to get redder, and yeah, Trump's got a pretty good hold on this piece of Maine. We're also going to fill out Maine at large for Joe Biden here. I think he'll win it by like 9 to 10 points, similar to how he won it last time. Hillary Clinton had a scare here, but that was also her margin was decreased, likely because of liberal third party candidates like I was about to say Gary Johnson was liberal. Jill Stein. I mean, libertarians attract people from both parties, to be fair. But I think Biden's going to win this, is going to win the state pretty comfortably. I think there's some polls right now showing that he's losing to Trump in Maine, which I think is a little ridiculous. But, polls are polls. Colorado, this is a seat. I had this state as safe for a very long time. I think that it still very much could be, but voted for Biden by 14 points. It's very left trending. Trump has really struggled in Colorado. I mean, just look at the shift between 2016 and 2020, and in 2018, Democrats really road to victory in this state with their victory in the governorship and a couple of House races. And then in 2022, the state got even bluer. So this state seems to be trending to the left like it's nobody's business. I think could very well still see it being safe. This is another state, another blue state that's not quite safe, but or like still kind of a former battleground state that is shifting leftward, kind of like Virginia, that polls are showing are competitive, but I don't believe that. New Mexico, this state's historically Democratic. I think Trump will narrow up the margin here. He'll probably do better in some parts of southern New Mexico and will improve with Hispanic voters here. Um, I think that I could see this go down to a 9 to 10 point margin instead of an 11 point margin, but still a very hefty margin for Joe Biden. Nothing really that his campaign should be worried about. Texas, I do think is going to be likely red. I've been very much on the train of Donald Trump's going to win Texas by less than 5 points. I think he's going to win it by just over 5 points, and I could very well. I'm uh, on the fence about the Senate race being likely Republican. We'll have to wait and see. But I think Texas, it's very left trending. But I think the trends are definitely not. They're being countered. A lot of the trends in suburban Dallas and um, Austin and Houston are being I'll use the word minimized by the massive shifts in the Rio Grande Valley, but I still think that it's going to be, that eventually Republicans are not going to be able to hold on to Texas. It's going to become an Arizona or Georgia. I just think that it's a lot more stubbornly red and it's a lot more culturally conservative than, say, Georgia or Arizona. So I think that that's going to make it harder for Biden to win. Also, the immigration issue at the southern border is really that's going to really hurt Biden. I think that his decision to wait on implementing executive order that incorporated parts of the bipartisan border deal that failed in Congress this year after him waiting on doing that in hopes of getting or using the issue or the border issue for his campaign. I think that that was a miscalculation because he said he couldn't do anything really, and the truth is he could have he did do something. He did implement that order, but now he's like kind of admitting that submitting to the public that he had an option to take without Congress approving a bill, and he didn't take it immediately, that is. So I think that's going to hurt him in the Rio Grande Valley, and I think just generally across the country. The border issue is just really complex and is going to look bad for either for whatever president is involved, but unfortunately for Joe Biden, that means that he's going to get screwed. And I think Trump is going to turn off more voters in the suburbs of some of the big metro areas in Texas, like Houston, Austin, and Dallas. But overall, I think it won't be enough to get the state under 5%. Florida's going to shift to the right. Could see this being an 8 to 9 point margin, maybe 7 to 8 points. Has done very well in Florida in the last two election cycles. He got South Florida to really just shift completely. Got a lot of Hispanic voters there to really just shift away from Democrats in 2020, and then that was amplified in 2022 by just trends in overall low turnout from Democratic voters. But I think that Trump is really going to win big in Florida this year. I mean, I would be shocked if Biden wins it. Um, and the Senate race is going to be very solid for Rick Scott too. Maybe not as I don't think it'll be as much as the as Trump's margin, but very much both are not likely to go to the Democratic Party at all. Iowa and Ohio, these are two states that used to be very competitive, along with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Both voted for Obama both times, but then they zoomed to Trump in 2016. He won them by high single digits, and then in 2020, despite the polls saying otherwise, they stuck with him by relatively similar amounts. I think Ohio's going to be bluer than Iowa. I think Iowa's got a little bit more flexibility to be like a 10, 11, 12 point margin. I think Ohio really maxes out at Trump plus 10. I think that Biden has a higher he has a low what's the word? He has a higher ceiling. Well, yeah, he has a higher ceiling. He has a lower floor, I guess would be the point. I think that he would lose it by 10 worst and eight and maybe six at best, like Tim Ryan. But I doubt that Trump's going to do worse in Ohio than he did last time. Sherrod Brown is going to really have to overcome Biden's loss here because the margin in Ohio really does matter for Democrats, for Senate Democrats, and for Sherrod Brown's reelection against Bernie Moreno. I think that if Biden's losing Ohio by 10, I think Brown is losing the state. I think if um, he's losing it by 7 or 8, I think that Brown's got he's in a very tight race. But yeah, I think if it's like Trump plus 10, Brown's probably losing by 2 or 3. Because I mean, ticket splitting still happens, but it's a lot that we're in a lot more polarized of an era here in politics. So I think Ohio stays with Trump pretty comfortably. New Hampshire, this is a state that's really gotten sour, has really soured on Trump. It almost voted for him the first time in 2016, but then it shifted away from him in 2020. And it was really good for Democrats in 2022 against Trump aligned candidates. And New Hampshire is a state where, despite the polls really being good for Trump, and we're looking at the RCP average now. Let me see if I can find New Hampshire. I want to find New Hampshire. Let's find it. Here we go. If it'll ever come up. Here we go. Really? There's got to be more than that. But either way, so you can see even in this poll, it's pretty close between Biden and Trump. I don't think it's going to end up being that close. I think Biden will win this state by a roughly similar margin. Nikki Haley did really well in the New Hampshire primary. She didn't win it, which kind of, was a sign that she was really going to lose. She really didn't have a chance in her, what's the word, her presidential campaign. But she did remarkably well. She did better than I expected in my final vote totals. I thought she'd lose the state by 20. She only lost it by 10. Um, and so there's a lot of more socially liberal but fiscally conservative Republicans here in New Hampshire that don't like Trump and clearly displayed that they wanted someone like Haley, who I think are more susceptible to Biden's campaign. And I use susceptible in like not, you know what I mean. But yeah, New Hampshire, I think, votes for Biden by 7-ish points, maybe 6. I could see it narrowing up, and if this is a Trump landslide, but as I said, this is going to be, I think that this is going to be a very close election, and my final prediction will reflect that. Virginia, we saw a crazy number out of Virginia recently, where let me get my thoughts in order. Where we saw Biden and Trump tied. This is a Fox News poll, and Fox News does have pretty good polls usually. I don't necessarily believe this one. I think the polling in general for Biden versus Trump is overly favoring Trump just nationally and on a state by state basis. But this tied poll definitely should be kind of scary for Biden. If these numbers continue, that means that he's going to have to pour money into this state that on a winning night for him would be pretty solidly, Biden plus 11, Biden plus 12, something like that. Even Biden plus 8 would be good. But if these polls continue to show a really tight race, that's really concerning for Joe Biden. But I honestly think that some of this is due to the crosstabs of this poll overestimating Trump's vote share with black voters, but which is a common thing that we've seen in the 2022 midterm polls, especially in like Georgia. And I think that that's happening here too, which might be influencing the poll favorably for Trump. But either way, I think Biden wins Virginia by, say, 8 to 9 points, maybe 7 points, just to be cautious. But overall, I think that Virginia's, swing towards Glenn Youngkin and Republicans in 2021, that was more of a statewide thing, and Democrats did really well there, or did pretty well in Virginia in 2022. Not amazing, but still pretty good. They did lose a House seat there, but they held on to one, or to two, actually. So, yeah, Virginia, not a lot to say there. Minnesota, this is another state where we've seen um, Trump really advertising and trying to really expand the electoral map, and he doesn't seem to really, Biden doesn't seem to be doing too well here, but I think Minnesota, this is a historically Democratic state. It hasn't voted Republican on the presidential level for what, 52 years? I think what was the last time? It was Nixon, right? I want to say Nixon. Yeah, Nixon was the last Republican to win Arizona, to win Minnesota on the presidential level, and I think Biden is not going. I think he's going to win somewhere between Hillary Clinton and his margin in 2020. Um, I think that it'll be like maybe 5 to 6 points. Trump's going to do better in the working class rural areas. Minnesota is one of the Midwestern states. It's one of the better Midwestern states for Democrats with working class voters. Um, but obviously they're still shifting rightward, and Trump has really brought them into the GOP camp. And I think Biden's going to continue to make gains in the Minneapolis suburbs. Turnout from Minneapolis, we'll have to see how that is. That if it's really low, that could mean, terrible things for Biden's margin there. But overall, I would be hard pressed to find Trump winning Minnesota, especially if he didn't do it the first time. Because despite what the polls are saying, even if, um, Trump wins this election, I would be shocked if he did better than he did in his 2016 election bid, because I think that you know we've kind of seen this election before. I think that there's a limited amount of reasonable outcomes here, and yeah, so Minnesota's that way. Then we get down to these toss up 94 electoral votes. I'm sorry if I'm rambling today. I haven't made a video in a while, so I'm kind of getting back into the groove. But we're down to these seven battleground states in Nebraska's second district. So 8 constituencies overall that are going to be decided by less than 5% or more. This is where you're going to see most of the campaigning, most of the advertising and fundraising spent. And yeah, we have Joe Biden at 225 electoral votes, Donald Trump at 219. So we're going to start with North Carolina. North Carolina, this is the only state on this map that voted for Joe Biden, or the only blank state on this map that voted for Donald Trump in 2020. It voted for him very narrowly, despite the polls saying Biden would narrowly win it. The polls in North Carolina, according to the RCP average, Trump's up by 5. I don't know if I believe that. North Carolina polls do tend to overestimate Democrats, but I think in 2022 and nationally, generally in 2022, Democrats were underestimated, and I think that's part of why Biden's numbers are so bleak here. I don't think they'll be as bleak in the actual results, but I think Trump could win the state by 3 to 4, kind of reflecting his 2016 margin. Um, I think he could easily crack 50% here. And Biden, I think, back in 2023 and even some of 2024, um, before or while the election season was still kind of formulating with the primaries and everything, I think Biden really saw North Carolina as one state where he could really reach out and win. But if Biden's winning North Carolina, then he's already won the election. So and it's kind of a similar problem to what Hillary Clinton had in 2016. She didn't focus on a lot of those Rust Belt states, like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. She focused more on North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, trying to expand the electoral map, and she ultimately lost those states by more than she did in the Rust Belt. But because that attention wasn't paid to those Midwestern states, um, she lost the election overall. So sometimes it's just better to, you know, win the baseline amount of votes and states, rather than trying to expand and overachieve, which is a problem that Trump's campaign is making right now. He's saying he's going to win New York or he's going to win New Jersey or Minnesota, and I think that that's really a big mistake. Um, so yeah, I think North Carolina right now, Biden's going to do worse with black voters, or he's going to get a lower amount of black voters. The northeastern part of the state, like Don Davis's district, um, is going to get a lot more Republican, not just because of redistricting. I just mean generally from the partisan results of 2020. I think it's going to continue shifting right. I think the suburbs are going to stay strong for Joe Biden. Um, and I think that he's going to do pretty well in the urban areas. So I think, and I think, but Kamala Harris will help minimize, like, destroy or losses with the black vote. Not saying that African American voters are going to like swing heavy towards Trump, like some people in the campaign are suggesting, or what the polls are suggesting. I'm just saying overall turnout. A lot of them, I think, are going to have a problem with or not going to be as enthused to show up and vote. And so I think that that's going to hurt Biden in North Carolina and in a lot of these states across the country. I think it's also going to hurt him in Georgia. I think Georgia, this state is really it's really not a good one for Trump. Just historically, I mean, he was the first Republican to lose it since George H.W. Bush in 1992, and Herschel Walker lost this race. Trump cost Republicans both Senate seats here in 2020 in the Georgia runoffs in 2021. Um, but I think what's saving him this time around, and I think the reason why I think that um, these polls are not super far off is one, Georgia's historically, even in 2022 and 2020, the polls were very, very accurate. Only minor errors were made in most of those races. And two, I think just it's like what I said with North Carolina, the share of black voters showing up to vote, I think is going to be not as enthused because Biden hasn't really made as many um, political accomplishments for the African American community as he promised. And I think some of that was out of his hand. Of course, we can talk about why or why not that happened, but overall, that's the sentiment. And I think even though Trump's got a lot of baggage, especially for the suburbs of Atlanta, with both minority voters, obviously, because they're the Democratic base, and also just traditionally Republican voters. I think even his like criminal case there in Georgia for trying to subvert the election results, that's getting delayed until likely until next year. And despite the fact that he's a convicted felon now, which won't play well with a lot of voters, I think I'm honestly inclined to believe that the black turnout for Biden in Georgia is going to be just not not ideal enough, or it's not going to be good enough for him to pull out a victory here. And so I think he's going to lose the state by about less than a point. I don't think it's going to be nearly as big of a margin as some of these polls are suggesting. But I think that he's in deep trouble in Georgia. But he can always win it back. I think that this is a state that's very much in reach, and yeah, it's a little surprising to see how far Georgia has swung in some of these polls towards Trump, but the consistency again, which I mean, you could always say for some of these, I mean, a lot of these polls are consistent, and you'll see that sometime that Georgia's a state where I agree with that, with the polls, and sometimes there are going to be other states on here that I don't agree with, but I think Trump is just, I think the polls in Georgia are worth trusting, and if I stand by everything I said. I gotta get on to the other states now. With Arizona, this is another state where the polls are really favoring Trump. He's up by a very similar amount. Arizona, though, I think is it's a worse state for Trump than Georgia. I think that he has really alienated a lot of the McCain type of Republicans, and him going to that rally this past week in Arizona and talking about how he wants to seek revenge for his conviction. It plays well for his base, but again, it's another sign or another example of him screwing up with the Arizona moderates in Maricopa County and just Biden's overall, or the Democrats' overall um, shot or overall increase. What am I trying to say? Arizona's overall increased Latino population, which again, Hispanic voters are shifting to the right, but not all Hispanic voters are the same as the ones in Miami. Anyways, Biden's, I think Democrats have really lucked out here. Katie Hobbs won the state without really campaigning all that hard. I think that she's a better candidate than most people gave her credit for. I was very negative on her at the time, and I genuinely thought that she was going to lose. But in that final week of the campaign, it did seem like she was gaining momentum, and she won. But overall, I think that just Trump's brand of, Republican of conservatism here is just really toxic and just isn't. It's really not sitting well with a lot of voters, and I think that's going to continue in 2024. I also think the abortion issue is going to be huge nationally, and also like in Arizona in particular because of the likely referendum for the abortion rights that will be on the ballot. That's going to be something that's going to help Ruben Gallego and Democratic House candidates, but also Joe Biden. So I don't think that this state's going to be lean Democratic like I once thought, but I think it'll be tilt. Nevada also is another state where the polls are really, really um, heavily favoring Trump. But again, Nevada's Republican polls have just been Nevada's polls have overestimated Republicans cycle after cycle, time after time, race after race. And although Republicans won the governor's race in Nevada, a governor's race is very different from a presidential or Senate race. Now, Nevada is a very polarized state, so the delta between Steve Sisolak and Catherine Cortez Masto in the 2022 statewide races wasn't that great. It was only like 2 points. And I think Trump's going to make inroads in Clark County, while Biden makes inroads in Washoe and the Reno area. Las Vegas is definitely an area for Biden to be concerned about, but I think just the Nevada Democrats are always they almost always win. It's like North Carolina. It's always close, but Republicans always win it. Nevada, it's the inverse. Democrats almost always win it by the skin, and Democrats, almost always come close to losing it, but they rarely ever do lose it. And so that leaves Democrats, or Joe Biden, with 242 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 251. So the Rust Belt and Nebraska's second congressional district are going to decide this election. So I think Nebraska 2 is going to be lean blue. It swung to the left significantly in 2020. I think Don Bacon's in serious trouble in his 2024 House race because he really did not overperform the top of the ticket that well in 2022. But he obviously has a chance at victory. And Trump's just terrible for this kind of suburban area and the voters within it. He lost it by more in 2020 than John McCain did in 2008, which is crazy. But that's also just partially left trends. But you can see the decrease in the margin for Republicans between Mitt Romney and Donald Trump. And I think that just overall, it's a good place for Joe Biden, and I think that he should feel confident about this not state but district winning that electoral vote, which could, depending on the election result, really help him win the presidency. So now the last three states are in the Rust Belt, and we're going to go through them one at a time. We're going to start with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, I think, is critical to either candidate winning the election, and I'm going to give it to Joe Biden. I think that despite the polls recently shifting back in favor of Trump, Biden's got a very solid coalition. He's very well known, or he has a strong connection to the state. I think that the trends in Pittsburgh and the Philadelphia suburbs and in Harrisburg are going to really help him counteract some of the shifts that Trump makes, maybe in the working class areas like Lackawanna County and a lot of the northeastern part of Pennsylvania on the New York border. And overall, I think a lot of those swing counties in the Lehigh Valley are going to really are really going to be representative of the state as a whole, and I think Biden's going to win them. Again, Trump has a very strong chance of winning Pennsylvania, but Republicans in a lot of these Rust Belt states, have faltered since the 2018 midterms, and I think that I don't think that that's not a make or break sign for them, but they really lost they've lost the 2022 Senate race to um to the Democrats by a massive margin. And I mean, it was 5 times Biden's victory. And while a lot can change in 2 years, I think the Philadelphia suburbs are just stubbornly shifting left. They really did not care about John Fetterman's, the controversy surrounding John Fetterman and his ability to serve, and they were really turned off by Dr. Oz. And I think that, that was one race, but I think, presidential and Senate races are very similar, and I think Trump has really, I think I could see him winning Pennsylvania, but I can see him to quote understand politics. I don't know if this is a direct quote, but I remember a video of him analyzing Pennsylvania for this election. He said there are like a bunch of different ways that I can see Joe Biden winning Pennsylvania in 2024, and there are only a few that I can see. There are only a few ways I could see Trump winning it. So I think the odds of so it's kind of using that logic, which I agree with. Um, Biden has more pathways to win Pennsylvania, and that really puts him in a good spot to win the election. Um, I am going to give Trump Wisconsin. This has been one of Biden's better states for polling, oddly enough, because it was so in 2020 it was so skewed towards him in the polling average, and he was supposed to win by 8, and he won it by less than a point. But for 2024, Trump's only ahead by 0.1%. I think that the state could easily vote for Joe Biden. It's been very successful for Democrats. I think Tammy Baldwin is very likely to win the Senate race here. She could even win it by a likely margin. Um, and I think Trump's going to win this state by the skin of his teeth, just because of the white working class vote, you know, chunk of voters, especially in the driftless region. But I think he's going to suffer in the Milwaukee area and in the suburbs surrounding it. I think a turnout out of Madison could be really bad for Biden, which could really I think that that could really counteract some of the shifts in the suburbs. I think in the Green Bay area, Biden or Trump could do a little bit better. I think it'll be pretty close to the 2020 numbers. But overall, I think Trump's going to just really max out, or not max out, but really going to shift and push a lot of these white working class, blue collar counties to the right, and Biden's going to do fairly well in the suburbs. And if he struggles with turnout in Madison, I think the state is pretty clearly, you know, uh, s- um, a narrow Republican victory. So then we get down to Michigan. Michigan is the last state here. I think that this state, oddly enough, in polling has often been the reddest or has shown the best results for Trump out of any of these states. I don't necessarily think that'll be the case in reality, just based on electoral history. But Michigan, there's a lot of things to be concerned about for both candidates. The state GOP has just really lost any like sense of has really just become very dysfunctional. They ousted their party chair. They're really just they've been putting up terrible candidates for the last couple of cycles. They've lost free election cycles in a row. And Biden, on the other hand, has to contend with an especially create an especially like crucial block of voters in Detroit who voted uncommitted in the primary, in the Democratic primary, and who may not come out to vote for him in November over his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. But overall, I think Michigan's a pretty stubbornly Democratic state. It's a sleeper state, for sure, sleeper swing state. I think that this state I'm going to put in the tilt Democratic column. I think Biden will do well enough in the suburbs, do well in Oakland. He'll lose ground in the working class areas like Flint and Macomb, but I think he's going to do better, just as most Democrats would, in Western Michigan with Grand Rapids and that heavily left trending region. And I think overall, he's going to keep up the margins enough where he can still win. It'll be closer than his free point victory in 2020 for sure, but I think he's still going to beat Trump here. And overall, that means that he wins the election if my prediction comes true. I can't believe that this video was another 40-minute long drag. I apologize, guys. These videos just really, I try to make a script for all of them, and then they just don't, I just don't, it doesn't reduce any of the time. And this is another case where I didn't make a script, um, and it still ended up being really long. It seems like no matter what, it's just these are going to be very long videos. I'm going to try my best to kind of formulate my thoughts here in the future, but if you see in this election, in this prediction, I think Joe Biden will win 277 electoral votes and Donald Trump will win 261. Again, as I said, a very close election. Trump flips Georgia and Wisconsin, but Biden holds on to crucial battleground states like Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. This will be the closest election, I think, since the year 2000 on the map. 2004, I believe, was 286 to 252. Yeah, so it wouldn't be as close. So this would be the closest election since 2000, if my prediction does end up coming true. Again, I'm still on the Biden wins train. I think the polls are overestimating Trump by a very large amount. I see a lot of reasons to think why he could also be favored as well, but I think Biden overall just is running a better campaign. Yes, he has a lot of issues, but the polls have historically, or have in the last 2 years, overestimated Republicans, and I think that there are a lot of, there's a lot of noise surrounding Biden's reelection campaign right now. Now, if these numbers continue into September and October, I will probably start to shift my prediction, but overall, I think this is where we stand right now. I feel a little crazy for being on the Joe Biden wins train right now, but that seems to be gaining a little bit more popularity now that Trump is going to have to deal with the issue that he's a convicted felon, which I surprisingly kind of forgot to talk about with a lot of this video. But yeah, I don't think that that's going to help his chances. But Biden has his own issues to be worried about. And I want to say to everyone, no matter who you think is going to win, don't count out either candidate. Even if you think that they're going to win, either one's going to win decisively, don't count out Trump or Biden, no matter what train you're on. Um, I am firmly on the third parties don't really matter in 2024. Not that I don't like third parties, just I don't think any of the third party candidates deserve a lot of the hype that they're getting. I don't think RFK Jr. or Cornel West or Jill Stein are going to do particularly well. They could influence the election in a couple of states, probably to the benefit of Donald Trump, but overall, we'll just have to wait and see. So thank you guys so much for watching this very long video. Make sure to like and subscribe to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy. Share this video if you're with someone who you think would enjoy it. And yeah, check out some of my other videos about the 2024 Senate elections. Maybe go back and watch some of my 2022 videos. Um, you know, just support the channel. I would really appreciate it. So thank you all for watching. Um, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.